Welcome back. I'm sure you are taking your seats, and I hope once again you've got your books and your pens and all the things that you need to be able to continue. The next very important term that we are doing is theme. Now, when we talk about theme, we are talking about a central message, a main idea, or a concern, or the purpose of whatever text it is that you happen to be reading. Now, sometimes a theme is very generalized. Okay, so I might say a theme that is generalized is war is bad. War might not be bad for everybody, but if I say war is bad generally, then that is a generalization. It could be also about not just a situation, but it could be about people, or it could be about life in general. We find that you need to be able to identify the theme because examiners love asking you about themes. It's almost always there, especially when you are doing poetry and when you are doing short stories. Inevitably, the question on theme pops up. Now, when we look at this, we have to, you'll see that there are some themes that we see all the time. The ones that we see all the time are good and evil, appearance and reality. For example, if you are doing a story about somebody who, by day, in school, treats all the teachers nicely and speaks nicely to them, but after school, they say horrible things about the teacher, then it means that the theme of that story is appearance and reality, because the way in which they appear is not the way they really are in reality. We also find that a lot of stories center around good and evil, and you can understand why, because if you've got a protagonist and an antagonist, oftentimes stories center around good and evil. If you look at that blue block there, if you look at the story of Cinderella, good versus evil. Cinderella is good and she's against this horrible stepmother. Goldilocks and the Three Bears, the theme of that is respect, or respect your elders, because if we look at Goldilocks' behavior in the house, it was not very good. If we look at Harry Potter, it's also good versus evil. And unfortunately, for some reason, I seem to have cut out the evil. But it's good versus evil. I don't know how many of you saw the movie Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo was about this little fish, clownfish, who went about his own merry way and eventually became brave and found independence. And so some of the themes there could be growing up, honoring your parents, bravery, becoming independent. You will find that in a poem you might get one theme, but usually in stories you will get more than one theme. It depends on what the chapter is about, or it will depend on how many different angles to the story there happens to be. There will be many, many themes. Do yourself a favor this weekend. Take any soap opera and go watch an episode of that soap opera, whether it's Isidingo or The Wild or whatever it is you like. And you will see that in those soap operas, there are so many themes in one episode. It's usually anger and hatred and revenge and love all together. Each of these are different themes in one episode. A book is exactly the same. So, when you are asked to identify a theme, or when you are doing your own reading, and it's bugging you now, what is the theme? Step one, do the most obvious thing. Look at the title. If the title is The Horrific Stories of Grade 9 Students, then you know that is the theme. Okay, horrific stories. Or if your book is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, you kind of can figure out that the theme is going to be about adventure in some way. You need to look at repeating patterns and symbols. You'll find, I already spoke to you about what symbols are, but let's say we are talking about a book, about some person who has come against, beaten all the odds, and they now have managed to succeed very well in school. And why? Because they're always talking about this little plant that is sitting on the windowsill. And every time they look at that plant, they are thinking about, how they can be like that plant. So the plant becomes a symbol for their progress. It becomes a symbol for their education. The theme then would be progress, or fighting against the odds, or beating all the odds, or perseverance. Themes can also be revealed in the setting, the characters, their actions and thoughts, points of view, motifs, and images. A motif, all it is an image that is repeated all the time. Now, let's take, for example, and you'll see this when I do poetry with you next week. Let's take, for example, one of the apartheid poems we've done, that the matrics are doing now. They are doing a poem called In Detention. And it's about people during the apartheid times who were imprisoned and had detention without trial and how they were killed there. Now, the setting of that is the apartheid times in prison. That's the context. So already we can figure out that the theme is probably going to be one of hardship, or it's going to be something about cruelty. That is why setting becomes important. And you can look at what the other characters say about, each other, how they interact in their situations to give you an idea of what the theme is. Now, to give you a nicer understanding of theme, I found a lovely little video which I think that you might enjoy, which explains theme quite nicely. So what you are doing is not only going to look at the pictures, but I need for you to read what the title, the subtitle kind of things are at the bottom of those videos. you go. I'm sure that you were able to see how some of those themes that you saw there relate to some of the books that you are doing. And please remember that we don't only find themes in English. You find themes in all languages, in study of any kind, any language that you do. So the next time when you are reading now, try to be a little bit more aware of the themes. The following two terms are terms that can make or break your English experience. And they happen to be denotation and connotation. Have you heard these words before? Look, even if you haven't heard these words before, again, like the other things that I've been doing with you, it is probably something that you know, but maybe you didn't know that these were the actual terms for them. But if you knew them, well done. Then all it means is that this is a revision of work that you already know. Now, when we talk about denotation, we are talking about words and the dictionary meaning of words. Now, if I had to take the book, a dictionary and open to the word table, then it might say a flat surface on which, with four legs, which people sit at. Okay? Then that would be the dictionary meaning. A word, however, can also be used in a way where I will say it, but I don't intend for you to understand the dictionary meaning of it. I'm actually hoping that you would understand something else by what I say. It's almost like a hidden meaning, or a suggested meaning, or an implied meaning. And when a word does this, we say it is a connotation. A connotation is when a word actually has some kind of feeling attached to it. We make somebody think about something, think in a particular way. And we see that when we are doing literature, yes, you must know the meaning of every word. However, more often than not, you must know the connotations, especially with poetry, because a poem is a very short piece of writing, and every single word that's in a poem is chosen very specifically. And you can imagine, if you want to analyze a poem, you have to know the connotations. You use connotations all the time. When you are, some teacher has annoyed you and you call that teacher a witch. I used this example before in a previous lesson. I don't think you mean she's wearing a hat and has warts on her face. You're probably meaning that she's not a nice person. And if you use terms like that, then you already are using connotation. Now let's look at the example that I've given you there. Okay? It says that there are words with the same meaning can have different shades of meaning. Now when we're talking about shades, it means that depending on the word that you use, you know, it can alter the way in which somebody understands what you are saying. So for example, let's talk about being thin. There are some words that mean thin but have a positive connotation. So if I said, being on the track team has made Alan slender and lean. Slender means thin, lean means thin. Lean, however, suggests that you don't have fat, which means that we are actually praising Alan, because we are saying that Alan is attractively thin. So that word, or those two words, slender and lean, have positive connotations. Sometimes we use words that are neither positive nor negative, and then we would say it is neutral. So if I just said being on the track team has made Alan thin, it is what it is, it's made him thin. There's no particular feeling attached to it. However, if I said, ooh, being on the track team has made Alan skinny and scrawny, now skinny means thin, scrawny also means thin, but it's not positive. If we call somebody scrawny, it means that we don't think much of them. Hey, they're too thin. Skinny means somebody who is too thin. So we see just by using the words slender, lean, skinny, scrawny, depending on what word we use, we can take the word thin and we can change that word thin to suggest something ugly, very negative, as in the word scrawny, or something very attractive and positive, as in the word lean. Now, this is not only important for literature, it's also important for your own writing, because you people are writing essays, compositions, letters, and it's very important to choose words that say exactly what you mean. Because instead of saying, ooh, I do not like that girl because she is so thin, you could say, just say, ooh, she was a scrawny girl, or she was an anorexic girl. Already, those words have feelings of negativity attached to them, without you having to explain and pray that somebody understands what you mean. Now, here's a word that you kids are familiar with. Hey? Hot. How many times have you used the word hot? Ooh, look at that guy. He's hot. Tay Diggs, hot. Or look at that girl, Halle Berry. Ooh, she's hot. Yes, don't laugh. I know you use this word all the time. Teachers, don't look surprised. You probably use this word too. But now let's look at that. Now the dictionary meaning, the denotation of this word hot means to have a temperature that is high, a temperature that is higher than that of the human body. That is what hot means. When you put your hand on the stove and the stove has been on, that plate is hot, you will get burnt. That is the ordinary meaning, the proper meaning of hot, the denotated meaning, or the denotation. A very easy way to remember that a denotation is the dictionary meaning is look at the words there. D for denotation, D for dictionary. Both start with D. So you have to remember that denotative meanings, dictionary meanings. So when I say, man, he is hot, or she is hot, what are we actually saying? Am I saying, oh my, look at that man. He is having a temperature that is higher than that of a human body. It is unlikely that I am saying that. Why would I want to say that? Why? Unlikely. Hey, what you are probably saying is, ooh, that person is fine. Hey? So what you are doing is you are implying that that person is cute, that that person is attractive. They are beautiful, and Lord knows what else you associate with hot. And so we see that then becomes a connotation, because we are certainly not saying, let me feel that man's forehead, ooh, it is now 40 degrees. That is not what we are meaning, isn't it? And we find that when we use connotations, the connotations come from meanings around us. We create these meanings. No one has sat down and said, ooh, let me think about what connotation can I mean. No, it just happens naturally, and connotations change all the time. I mean, one of the strangest connotations is cool. Do you realize that hot and cool actually mean very similar things? How's that for ridiculous? So you can see that we create these meanings. They come out from our cultural associations, from depending on what our age happens to be even. Now, it is very, very important for you to be able to identify when we see words, whether a word has a positive connotation or whether it has a negative connotation. Because sometimes you might be asked things like, justify your opinion, or do you agree? And those questions are usually only best answered when you understand the connotations of the words. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to look at the slide, and if you want you can write it down, but I don't think you'll have enough time. You know, just look at it and figure out whether the pairs, the different pairs of words, sentences I've given you are positive or negative. If you feel that the phrase is positive, put a plus. If you feel it has a negative, it's negative, then put a minus sign next to it. Okay, so 3 minutes. Here goes. All right, let's look at these pairs of phrases. A powerful stink and a powerful aroma. Now, what would change? Both those words mean a fragrance or smell, you know, when you smell, what it is that you are smelling. But the words stink and aroma mean opposite things. Stink is unpleasant, so that's definitely going to be a negative. Aroma is a pretty smell. Okay, think about when you're spraying air freshener. That would be an aroma. So that's a positive one. A dynamic leader and a pushy leader. Somebody who is dynamic is someone who is versatile. It is somebody, you know, who can do lots of different things and do all of these things well, who can think very quickly. That's a very positive trait to have. Whereas a pushy leader is somebody who is stubborn, who wants their own way all the time. That is not nice. To squander money or spend money. Squander means reckless, to use recklessly, which is a minus. To spend, it's very neutral. We can just say positive, but it's fairly neutral. It doesn't say anything. Reckless plan, daring plan. It depends on the context. Generally, reckless means negative because you are doing things that put yourself in danger. Daring doesn't always mean negative, but it could. So I just put a plus there, but if you had a plus or a minus because you were not sure, that is fine as well. And I'm only going to do number 5. When you watch this again, you can look at it. And we've got here, energetic children and wild children. Oh my word. Imagine somebody saying, you have wild children. I'm sure you will be offended. Hey, so the word wild turns that sentence into a negative. Whereas energetic could mean the person is sporty. We don't know what that means. Okay, it just means somebody has a lot of energy. So I've put a plus there. You find that sometimes words can be positive or they can be negative. I want you to just look at number 10. A thoughtful response and a calculated response. Both mean to think deeply about something before you respond, before you answer. Thoughtful could mean thoughtful as in the person, you know, doesn't want to hurt someone, or it could mean that they sat and thought long and hard before they responded. Calculated also means the same thing, but it depends on the story that you are reading. What other words are there around it? What do we know about the character, which would tell you whether a word has a positive connotation or it has a negative connotation. Now, another very common word that you are going to come across is imagery. And we've done imagery already to some extent when we had done figures of speech. And you just need to remember is that when we are talking about imagery, I don't know if you can remember the previous lesson that we did. When we are talking about imagery, we are talking about our senses. We are talking about descriptions in terms of how things look, how they smell, how they taste, how they feel, the things that you hear. So whenever you see imagery, you must remember that we are talking about the 5 senses, the descriptions that we get according to our 5 senses. Here we have a passage. I will read it with you just so that we can go through it a little bit quicker. Teachers, you can take your time when you do the rerun of this. And I will show you how this passage is full of imagery. On rocky islands, gulls woke. Time to be about their business. Silently, they floated in on the town. But when their icy eyes sighted the first dead fish, first bits of garbage about the ships and wharves, they began to scream and quarrel. The cocks in the Boston backyards had long before cried the coming of day. Now the hens were also awake, scratching, clucking, laying eggs. Cats in malt houses, granaries, ship holes, mansions, and hovels caught a last mouse, settled down to wash their fur and sleep. Cats did not work by day. In stables, horses took their halters and whinnied. In barns, cows lowed to be milked. Boston slowly opened his eyes, stretched and woke. The sun struck in horizontally from the east, flashing upon weather vanes, brass cocks and arrows. Here a glass-eyed Indian, there a copper grasshopper, and the bells in the steeples cling-clanged, telling the people it was time to be up and about. I'm sure just by listening to me reading it or reading it for yourself, you can get an idea of the busyness of the time. You know, it was morning and it seemed like everything just came alive. Now, if you have to look at, I've identified some words. Just about everything there is full of images. But very quickly, I've extracted some of the words there that relate to your senses. We've got rocky islands, which relate to your sense of sight, as well as texture. You know, what do you feel? Floated, you know, it's a movement. It's something that you would see. Garbage is something that you'd see, maybe even smell. We've got this scratching, clucking, laying eggs. Those are all sound words, as is whinnied. Sun struck in horizontally from the east. We get a picture in our mind of what the sun looked like as it came out in the east. And we look at bells in the steeples, cling clanged. We get the sound of it. So you can see how full of images this passage is, simply because it has all these different sensations, these senses, sensual descriptions attached to it. Now, how many of you have heard this term before? Diction. Yes, you're quite right. It sounds like dictionary. You are almost on the spot. Now, think about dictionary. What is a dictionary? Yes, it is a book of words. So when we're talking about diction, we are talking about words, the way in which words are used. For an example of this would be, we in South Africa, if we are not trying to be gangster, then we are saying going. But if you think about many of the American movies that we watch, they often drop the end and they say going. We don't speak like that. But if you saw that, G-O-I-N apostrophe, you would, and we see this all the time, you could assume that the person who is using these words is either uneducated, poorly educated, or maybe the American, or maybe they're speaking in a way that is not familiar to us. They don't come from the region that we live in. That is why diction is important, because it also tells you the region people come from. Now, generally when we're talking about diction, we're talking about formal diction, or casual diction, or something that is slang. Slang is very, very informal. So if I was saying, if I want to speak formally, I'll say, I hope you are not angry with me. But if I want to be more casual, I'm talking to my friend and I'm not talking to the principal, I might say, I hope you aren't mad. Because aren't is an abbreviation, a contraction of are not, and mad is just another way, a more casual way of saying angry. And if I'm speaking in slang way, I'll say, well, I hope you ain't ticked with me, hey. We don't really speak that way, but we often use the word ticked. We say, I was ticked off at somebody, which means that you are speaking slang. And you find that the diction that you use often varies depending on various reasons. So, when we choose the words that we want to speak, or when an author or poet chooses the words he or she wants to use, he or she chooses it for different reasons. It depends on how well that word or those words fit into the meaning that the speaker wishes to convey. It tells us the mood the speaker wants to create, or what the context is. In other words, maybe the historical context or the political context. Or it depends on the audience. I mean, if you are going to write a fairy tale and you used 7 of the biggest words you know, it's pointless. 5-year-olds are not going to understand. Or it might, we might choose words depending on how we want the audience to react to what we are saying, or the reader to react to what we are saying. Now, here's an example of different types of diction. First one is slang. How many of you know the word emo? Hey? I remember that through last year and even a bit of this year, everybody was wanting to be emo. Hey? Emo is when you are overly dramatic, either crying for no reason, putting on a performance. You know, some people love being depressed all the time. They like that feeling of attention. We might say, that person is emo. Okay? Meaning emotional. Some people are genuinely like this, but as time is going by, a great number of teenagers think it's fashionable to be emo. They want to dress in black, and then they want to be all crying and dying all the time. So if we say somebody is emo, that is a slang term. It's not a real word. Or my bad. Hey, how many of you use this? So the teacher told you, or not, maybe not the teacher, but your friend, was walking past you, and accidentally you pushed your friend, with your hand. You were talking to someone, you waved your arm, and you slapped the person in the face. Say, oh, my bad, sorry, meaning that you are acknowledging that you have done something wrong. Okay, in other words, I was being bad. We don't say, oh, I apologize, I was being bad. If we are speaking in slang, we say, oh, my bad, and that's an apology. Okay, you've acknowledged what you've done. A cliche, however, and this is something you need to avoid, is where we use figurative language. We spoke about figures of speech some lessons ago, similes, metaphors, and those kinds of things. But we overuse it. And when we overuse it, it becomes predictable. It becomes boring. And when it becomes predictable and boring, because it's been used so many times over time, we say it is a cliche. An example is, oh my word, I was scared out of my wits. People say that. We still say that. Or we might say, oh, I totally lost track of time. It's not incorrect, but it's boring. We use it all the time. Now, I'm sure we use it with our friends, and that's fine, but we need to become a bit more aware of it when we are doing this for our own writing. We must avoid becoming cliched, because when we become cliched, it becomes predictable. And then the next one that you often might find, especially when you're doing summary writing and comprehension, is jargon. And jargon basically is the use of words that are specific to a field or position. An example of this would be, if I am talking to your teacher, notice your teachers will know what I'm talking about, but maybe you won't. And I'll say, oh, have you heard about those Annas, hey? They are really quite horrific. The LOs and the ASS, I really don't know what on earth the department wants us to do. Have you looked at SAMs? Now, you don't know what I'm talking about. Hey, you think I am speaking in tongues. No, I am not. What I am speaking is jargon. Your teacher knows what I am talking about, because both of us are in the same field. It's like me having to go to a mechanic, and they're talking to me about the carburetor and the torque and horsepower, and I don't know what on earth these people are talking about. I just nod my head. That's jargon. So we need to remember that jargon is scientific language, or it is specific to one particular field or profession. It's not nice to do that when you're in company, because you exclude other people if they're not in the same field. Now, jargon is not always used, but as I said, that this is just one of the styles. This is one of, some people use this diction depending on what it is that they are happening to be writing about. The next one is mood. Now, mood or atmosphere is the feeling that is created when you are reading something. Now, I'm not talking about now you cloaking yourself up in a blanket and sitting under the duvet and reading. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you read something and all the words suggest to you an overall atmosphere or overall mood. An example of mood would be if you wanted to have a Valentine party. Okay? And you put red hearts everywhere, and you had soft music playing, and you had lovely posters, of romantic movies. The mood you are trying to create is one of love, one of romance. That's what we mean by mood. You can't touch mood, you can't see mood. Okay? It's just like a feeling that kind of hangs in the air. That is mood. Think about when you tell your friends, you know what, please don't bother me now, I am not in a good mood. It's because you're probably feeling irritable and angry. There's like this big dark cloud that is following you everywhere when you say, I'm not in a good mood. Now, when writers are trying to create the mood, it doesn't just happen in one sentence. You will find that it's the different sentences, the theme, the setting, the diction, all of these things together create a mood for us. Sometimes, depending on how long a piece is. If it's not a very long piece, the mood might be created right at the beginning and it is sustained throughout. Or you might find that other pieces, it might start off in one mood, might be happy and exciting, and then there might be a tragedy, and then the mood becomes very dark and dreary. So the mood will change, again, depending on the context and depending on what is being said. Here are some words that describe mood. Fanciful. You know, fanciful is almost like fantastic. Melancholy. Melancholy means when you're melancholic, when you're all dreary and sad all the time. Frightening, mysterious, frustrating, romantic, gloomy, sentimental, happy, sorrowful, joyful, suspenseful. You find that many of these words are similar to tone, but mood and tone is not the same thing. Hey? Now, tone is when, I spoke to you about this before. If you can imagine when somebody speaks to you, what emotion do you hear in their voice? Now, you know that when you are in one room and your mommy is in another room, depending on how she calls you, you know whether mom is going to give you some supper or whether she's going to give you a slap. Okay, because if she's going to scold you or smack you, she's going to probably scream out your name in anger. But if she's very gentle, then you know, okay, you're going to get some reward. And so that quality that we hear in the voice, that is the tone. And when we are doing literature, we must try to imagine it. If you had to speak it out, you know, how would you speak it out? What type of voice would you use? Not loud or soft, but what type of emotion would you use in the voice? Because then that there is the tone. Because the point of the tone is so that whoever is reading can feel the emotion that the writer wants them to feel. Here we have some ideas, some words that describe tone: amused, humorous, pessimistic, angry, informal, playful, cheerful, ironic, and so on and so forth. The last thing I want to do with you now is I'm going to give you 2 slides. And on these slides, I want you to read the little extract that I have there and see if you can identify the tone and the mood. And when I talk about context clues, it means look at the words there. What words can you pick up from the passage that I have given you right at the top that tells you what the tone is and what the mood is? I'm just going to give you one minute to do this. Guys, we must do this quickly, hey? Okay, let's look at your answers. Bouncing into the room, she lit up the vicinity with a joyous glow on her face as she told, it should be spoke, about her fiancé and their wedding plans. The tone is excited, joyous, thrilled. You can imagine this person speaking about the fiancé and the wedding plans. There's a good chance if she's getting married that she's happy about it. Context clues. What words tell us this? She lit up, joyous, glow on her face. All of these words kind of go with wedding. So that's the context of it and suggests that she's excited. And the mood then would be a mood of excitement because you can imagine her coming into the room and everybody is feeling excited with her. There's another one for you. Okay, let's see how this went. She huddled in the corner, clutching her tattered blanket and shaking convulsively as she feverishly searched the room for the unknown dangers that awaited her. You can see the way in which I read it is very different from how I read the first one. You get the feeling of fear, nervousness, desperation. Those would be the tones because that's what we can hear in the person's voice. How do we know that? because we've got the words huddled, clutching, unknown dangers. These are scary things, people. And so the mood then would be a mood of fear. That's the kind of feeling that hangs in the air. All right. Now, today we've done quite a bit of work, eh? The next time I see you, I will be doing poetry with you, and there are a few other terms that you need to know, but which link up specifically to poetry. So I'm hoping that today was beneficial for you. Please make sure that you go over this work, because I promise you, if you get the hang of all of these things now, you will not have a problem later on. So that's my lesson for today. I will see you again the same time, same place next week. You have a lovely weekend.